Gotcha.
Hey,
Appreciate that. Yeah. I was seriously speaking to Sarah Mediel, and we were making plans about how I was gonna get there. Yeah.
So Sarah Mediel is a good guy. I know him. He and his wife Amalia, I think it's her name, Amalia. They're really cool. They're the ones who took us around and we went to the Dead Sea and all these other places. We went into Jerusalem and everything, Jerusalem. He's a pretty good dude, well-intentioned, but he's off. You know, they just, there's something missing. You know, there's something missing.
That's why what's happening to them now, they're all getting, a lot of them are getting shifted from the land at the moment.
Here's a question, since we're touching on Dimona, and I've heard roughly over the last 4 to 6 weeks that they're actually petitioning to get them out, and they've actually petitioned the government to actually remain within the land. What is the current circumstances of that? Is anyone aware of exactly were they able to get them out? I know certainly the dust up with the changing in the government may have delayed those decisions. Does anyone know exactly what has transpired? Were they able to send those Israelites out of that land, or are they still there?
From what the latest I've heard, they're still going through the appeal process. I don't know where they are with it, but that's the last thing I heard was with the appeal process. And like you said, the change in regime might delay that, which could be good for them and keep them longer. But as far as I know, no one has been deported yet. They're just going through the appeal process.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question, Brother Lee. That's something I meant to follow up on, and I haven't been keeping up with that story, but that's interesting.
Here's a question. The Most High said in Deuteronomy chapter 28 that we will depend upon our enemies for the want of all things. Can you each elaborate on that one text and exactly how that relates to what you're seeing and what you have experienced in your lifetime?
Yeah.
We don't own anything. You know, I don't care where you are. We don't own anything. Even if you own a business, who's going to supply you with with your products? You know, for example, if you sell, you know, I don't care, you know, sporting equipment. We'll say that, sporting equipment. You know, where do you get? Who's your suppliers? You know, who supplies the materials from which those sporting equipment is made and derived from? Who sold them? Who puts them together? You're gonna go through, you know, our enemies. You know, so we're completely a dependent people, and that goes to what Brother Dawid was saying. You know, we have to become independent. You know, we have to grow. I mean, we don't even grow our own food here in America. You know, and they may have a few black farmers, but they're going through problems trying to get resources that they were owed from years back. So they're trying to get a form of reparations, so to speak, just to grow food and have the resources necessary to do what they have to do. We don't own anything. And that's our downfall. We depend on this man to eat for everything. You know, you name it, that there's nothing. I mean, you might have certain Israelites, you know, and they don't know they're Israel, but Israelites who may have money and they may start a shoe company, but still the materials that makes the shoes, where are they being made? You know, maybe they're being made in another country. We're not manufacturing anything. So that's quite obvious. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs, but that's still part of the curse. And those are things that you're going to be under. But make no mistake about it. Once you turn to the law and turn to Yah with wholeheartedly, with everything, you know, you're going to start seeing some of that lifted off of you. You will see it lifted off of you. But I guess it's all not going to be said and done until Yah comes back and redeems his people for the final, that final time. You know, that's when we'll see the curses, all the curses lifted off. And it is a gradual process at that point. That's my take on it.
Yeah, my take on it, I think I got, it's like 4 components that, give me a second. All right, sorry about that. Yeah, it's about 4 components that I can say that ties into that curse. That we don't, the establishment that we don't have. The one, we don't have our own banking system. We don't have our own banking system. All our currency finances come through outside sources, outside the community. We don't have our own hospitals. The whole medical industrial complex depends on our enemies. We don't have any educational facilities to where we teach our own. All that comes from outside sources, from our enemies. For the most part, you might have some mom and pop stores, but we don't really own our own groceries or stores. Like I said, we don't have our own lot in the agricultural field. You know, we don't have any ports. We don't have anything. Everything that we do, import, export, we depend on our enemies for. You know, so those are the things I wanted to touch on that applies to that curse. Is we don't own anything, like Brother Benai said. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, brother. Okay.
Don't ignore that, Zakia. That's my wife. Yeah.
Yeah. So just like the brother was saying, we don't own anything, and basically while we were under these curses, we've been conditioned not to want to own anything. You know, we've been conditioned where we want to depend on our enemies for everything. So in the process of reversing that curse of being the tail on the head, we have to start thinking like a head. We have to start wanting to be able to come, to gather these things ourselves and work together. And that takes a long time, based off the condition that we've been under for over more than 400 years, if you ask me. I know people say the 400-year curse or whatever, or the 400-year captivity, but it's been well over 25 plus 100 years, if you ask me. So yeah, those are the components that I wanted to elaborate on that fits that curse, in Deuteronomy 28. We don't own those establishments.
I know.
Well said, brother.
When we try, like in America, Wall Street in the 1900s. But once you try to rise up, the Americans burned it down in 1921. That Wall Street. That's when when Israelites tried to rise up, but because we're still under them curses, it all got burnt down. So even though what you're saying that we don't own anything, we're in foreign land. So I don't think since we're in foreign land, I think when things start to happen, when we go back to the land, that's when we're going to start to do our own things. But we're in foreign land, so for me, I don't see it's going to happen. They won't let it happen. That's my take.
Yeah, well said, Brother Henry. I feel as though Brother Dawid touched on some very, very pertinent points. I was just going to add shelter and clothing. We don't even own our own homes. People are paying mortgage to the banks, or even if you do own your own home, you're still paying property tax. And I find it really interesting because I saw, I think it was a clip on Facebook or something, and someone said we're the only species on Earth that actually pays to live here, So it's, and as far as clothing goes, our dressing should be in accordance with the law, wearing materials of 100% fabric and whatnot, even with our clothing having the borders of blue and the fringes on them. Except for mom and pop shops or small businesses coming together and make that happen. That's not something that's publicized amongst our people, because we don't own facilities that can operate in a capacity to produce those things. And I Brother Henry, you just brought up a great point. I like to watch historians like speaking on people like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and things that they were saying then about how there can be no integration, because there is no integration with these with our captors, be it in the States or in the UK or in Canada or wherever else we may be. It's just not going to happen. So until we have our own land, we can't actually implement these things and put them in place. So I feel as though what would be great for us to do now is just to cultivate the mentality that indeed we will be separated from these people, and just start to put preliminary infrastructure in place, in terms of coming to understanding of who we are first and foremost, abiding in righteousness through what Yah has laid out for us. And then from there, we can progressively build on to, whatever our society is going to look like once we've integrated fully. Brother Malachi, I actually looked into Ravenous Bird. I was on his channel. Man, that brother had some interesting things to say. He was talking about the wilderness being out there in the Philippines. I don't know if
Philippines,
you
yeah,
saw that. Yeah. What's your take on that, brother?
Let's touch on that later on. I would certainly like to. I would certainly like to hold a special segment on that that we will do in the panel pertaining to that everyone may give their opinion, their view on where that gathering place would be and why. I've been in contact. I've just spoken here lately with our brother Mikiel Ben Levi, and he is down in Guyana, South America. Speaking with him, he speaks Hebrew, and also I do believe he may also speak the ancient Hebrew. A matter of fact, he does. So I would certainly like to take what Ravenous Bird has been saying and has presented, and I would like to hear Brother Mikiel Ben Levi's viewpoint because he speaks the language. From a linguistic point of view, I have no idea. Based on my understanding, I don't personally believe that the islands of the Philippines is a place that we should be gathered. I do believe that the Most High will make it plain where it is we are to assemble in that time. Now, for that to take place, as we were just discussing these curses, certainly our people have to separate ourselves from the midst of our enemies in these nations. This is something that many of our people are unwilling to do, because if we are dependent upon this man for the want of all things, then how am I going to separate myself from him who is feeding me? And I think that is the perspective of our people. I think that decision becomes an easier decision to make when the Most High strips our enemies of their ability to provide us with anything. And then we will be forced to turn to the Most High. Then we will realize, well, our enemies are unable to provide for himself. The God that was given to us by our enemies is unable to save our enemies. So then it becomes clear to us why, quote unquote, JC is not able to deliver us when he fails to deliver our enemies who brought him to us. So we have to separate ourselves. Many of us have not known or have we experienced leadership in the midst of ourselves. At least we certainly have not experienced righteous leadership. And for that reason is why many of our quote unquote leaders in times past in the many nations in which we dwell have been killed. For they were leading the people, but they were not leading them in righteousness and in truth. You had mentioned the Black Wall Street. It was destroyed. The Most High did say that he would destroy the work of our hands. And so now our people being stiff-necked and stubborn, their goal is to build it back again. And to do that, the Most High will destroy it again. This is my view on that. So we are dependent upon our enemies for the want of all things from the time we wake up each and every day. And in order for us to break ourselves from that, we will have to separate ourselves from our enemies, because our enemies have placed themselves in the position of God. They provide us everything. And so therefore, many of our people do believe in their minds that our enemies are gods. For we do idolize and we do worship them. And we see clearly where we cannot make a move without their approval. And so to separate ourselves from them is a frightening thing, for we have not known that. All we have known is what these people have taught us. And to separate ourselves from them is a frightening thought to many of our people.
Brother, you bring up a great point, because I've seen some Israelites from America who've moved to Africa, and then, be it Ghana or Tanzania. I went to there for a couple of months. They start making these videos and they're warning the Americans and still the Israelites in America, don't come here. It's not what you thought it was going to be. In fact, we're leaving and we're going to be there, within the next month or this or that. And what I've come to find is that they feel as though they can leave their various cities, like in New York or in LA or wherever they're at in the States, and come to Africa amongst Israelites and basically reproduce that city in a different place, which it's impossible. That cannot happen. So it just speaks to your point about how they cleave to the ways of our enemies, so much so that they just can't fathom separating themselves from that. They're so institutionalized in that lifestyle, you know. So that's a great point you bring up there, without a doubt. It's frightening to them.
Yeah.
They can't assimilate.
To touch on that is, we as a people, we must deal with the reality of our circumstance. All we know is what these people have taught us. If we were to remove every last one of our enemies from the planet right now, what we would have is a reproduction of everything that they have done. It would just be done by our own people. It would be the same oppression. It would be the same evil. It would be the same violence, the same theft, the same deception, because all that we know is what these people have taught us. And we must deal with that reality. And in order for us to separate ourselves from that thinking, from that teaching, from that indoctrination, we must turn away to something that's the polar opposite of that. And that would be the Most High's law, statutes, judgments, and precepts. And that is why, as we turn to the Most High's law, statutes, judgments, and precepts, what we do in that law is in opposition to everything our enemies do. Absolutely everything. And so therefore, that is why they may try to ostracize us as we turn to that law, because we're not going to go for the lies, the deception, the murder. We're not going to go for the homosexuality, the bestiality. We're not going to go for the idolatry, the adultery, and everything else that is perfectly acceptable in the midst of them. And they have taught us this. So once we separate ourselves from them, now we are enemies unto them, because we are no longer adhering to that which they subscribe to, that which they have forced upon us. And as we walk in that law, they will become enemies unto us. We are their enemy, or they are our enemies from the start anyway. But they would like to have us believe that we are all one and we are all the same, though we can see clearly, based on how we treated throughout the earth, that that is not so. But as we separate ourselves from their mischief, from their whoredoms, etc., and we walk within the Most High's law, statutes, judgments, and precepts, I believe then that they will strengthen themselves, or the Most High will strengthen them against us. And that's when the Most High is going to turn on our behalf and destroy them. Because what they will not do, they will not at all favor the righteous man. The wicked man will not. And so as we turn to righteousness, we're really going to see exactly who and what these people truly are. And it will be made plain to us that they are liars, and it will be made plain to us that they are indeed our enemies, and they are indeed the enemies of the Most High Yah and his word.
Sure. Brother, I have a quick question. It's not exactly on topic, but it's about Bathsheba and David. Was Bathsheba an Israelite? Brother, do you have a knowledge as to whether or not she was?
I want to say she was, because her father was an Israelite.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, because I just wondered, I was connecting dots because I'm like, she married a Hittite, so she would have transgressed in doing that, but then
That's right.
you know, yeah, okay. Thank you. That provides clarity.
I wanted to just add what Brother Dawid said earlier. He was talking about the curses, and that we've been under them for so many thousand years, or the captivity, 400 years. And I just wanted to make, I think, the last stand of the Israelites to try to hold some form of their own power was in the United Kingdom. And that was when we had King James the first of England, King James VI of Scotland, and all of most of the nobles at that time were all black Israelite men and women. And also we know in around 100 years or so prior to that, in Spain and Portugal, you also had the black royals who were there in Granada and Sevilla, who were also of the line of David, because they were the royalty in Europe at that time. So they still carried on. And so we had earlier in Spain and Portugal, you had the deportations of the Israelites to West Africa. That was prior to the start of the West African, what we call the slave trade. So they deported the Portuguese and the Spanish tribe of Judah, the blacks, the royalty from Europe. They deported them over to West Africa. And that's where we start the transatlantic slave trade. They were chased in, and that was the beginning of that. Whereas in the United Kingdom, you still had King James VI and his family, and the nobles were still black Israelite people. And there's a few documents you can get in this country and books you can read now, which actually describe certain noblemen and noble women in this country in the 1700s who were still they're all of the tribe of Judah. They were all royalty and nobles. But once this country fell that populace, that was it. And that happened all around that time. We're talking about 400 years, and that cycle. So that the last royals in this place was around that time. And that's why I think most of you may have heard of Cromwell and the Jacobite wars. Yeah. I don't know if you heard about that. Cromwell, the Round Hats. I'm not sure if you know about that. But the Jacobite
D. Murphy.
Yeah. But I know Dave has spoken about it, but we know about it. That's part of the history we're taught in the United Kingdom. But we're not told that the Jacobites means Jacob. We're not taught that the Union Jack was the union of Jacob and the tribes which in France, England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, that they were united under that flag, the flag which in America I think is reviled, the one which is off the British flag, not the English flag with the red cross, but the British flag, which was actually there as I think Dave mentioned before about the New Jerusalem. So they felt they were safe here for a point in time because they were respected. But let's say around 400 years ago, that stopped. And I just wanted to point out that the just something which is still celebrated by a lot of people is the Guido Fawkes, who was a Jesuit who came to assassinate King James, the Black King. And there is actually a speech where he gives thanks to the Most High for protecting him from that plot. It wasn't to blow up Parliament, the stories which you've heard. It was to actually assassinate King James, the first King James VI of Scotland. But if you listen to his speeches and what he actually has to say, it's quite incredible. And in the respect that the humility of what he speaks as a king is what you would expect from somebody from the tribe of Judah, Yehuda. It's quite interesting if you read those texts from him. It's quite powerful. And then that's what I'm saying. The 400 years we're talking about, from what I can see, corresponds around that time. Anyway, I just wanted to add that.
That's a very interesting revelation, Brother Kwame, because the city I'm from in Nigeria is called Lagos. And there's a city in Portugal called Lagos. And I was always wondering why it's the exact same spelling, exact same pronunciation. So saying that the Portuguese and the Spanish came down to West Africa, it makes sense that it was originally those people and they came and founded cities in West Africa and then named them after themselves.
They did as they got there. And as soon as they were there, that's when because they were really easy to identify. As when they came over there, they were easy to identify because they all wore black. That was the clothing they were wearing at that time. I mean, the historical information is there to be read about these people being deported from Granada, Sevilla, and these places. But it's all there to be read. But that's when we see the start of the slave trade, when they were all deported, because they were a lot of the Israelites. What they did was they had to wear a red cross to say that they had converted, but the Spanish knew that they hadn't, and that's when they were all That was a part of them all deporting. But anyway, that I digress. I just wanted to add that part to it. For the 400 years, we did have royalty over here in Europe, black royalty, nobility, but then they were deported to the Caribbean islands, deported to West Africa, and that really starts the whole slave trade, captivity.
Appreciate you sharing that, brother. That's big. Brother Lee, speak to your point about how when you're talking about the curses and how we witness them, I had a flashback in Nigeria. Something that our people don't often think about is the fact that not only were the Israelites who were taken, by ships in captivity, to the lands of their enemies, not only were they afflicted, but also the Israelites who are left behind in said African countries are also oppressed under their various governments. So, growing up in that society and seeing the disparity between the elite, the very rich, and then the ever eroding middle class, and then most of the people are basically living in poverty. I constantly thought to myself, why are our own people, our own leaders doing this to us? But little did I know, and it wasn't up until recently I actually came about this information, that they actually left proxies in power. So even though these men look like us, they're Israelites, our leaders, they're actually in cahoots with our enemies. So basically when our enemies said that we gained independence, yes, they left the land, but they left their agents in power to continue to implement their will. So in as much as maybe not all the curses in Deuteronomy, elaborating on the slavery and those people going to a foreign land, the Israelites that were in captivity in their own countries definitely experienced a lot of the curses that are laid out there, without a doubt.
Yeah,